The term red herring has been around since 1807, when English polemicist William Cobbett used it to refer to the custom of English hunters using a strong-smelling smoked fish to divert and distract dogs from chasing undesirable animals such as rabbits. For literary purposes, a red herring serves the same purpose as the smoked fish, with our reader being the dog, without being derogatory, that is. In a story, the red herring is a device used to divert the reader away from the main plot or focus of the story by introducing a false lead or piece of information. The utility of this is to add to the depth of your narrative and allow, at least partially, the real story to be obscured, making its reveal later in the narrative more surprising. We keep our reader on their toes by not allowing them to be entirely sure if they can trust the information they're being told, and challenging them to follow a more intricate story. As a writer, this is important as it keeps your reader engaged, creates tension, provides surprise and twists, as well as heightening the overall sense of suspense. As you can imagine, red herrings are far more common in mystery-style novels where finding the truth is the whole point. Look at any Agatha Christie book or watch Alfred Hitchcock's films to get a great idea of how you've been deceived by the writer. Just like with when we subvert expectations, the larger umbrella category of which also includes red herrings, we have to be careful in the way we carry this out. Let's be clear, do not misdirect your reader simply to pad out your story, like in the Da Vinci Code, nor should you do it to manipulate emotions of the audience with things like fake-out deaths in Star Wars. When you use them to simply add more content, it is obviously lazy and convoluted. Don't treat your reader like an idiot. If you have something you want to say or show, and the only way you can make it happen is to misdirect them, then you're probably doing something wrong. Go back and find a way to more naturally work that element into the story if it's so important to you. The red herring has to serve the plot. Having a character falsely accuse another character in a detective novel almost always leads to the detective finding additional information that helps them solve the case as a result of the diversion. It is important to the plot, not to the padding. A book I've praised before, Gone Girl, makes excessive use of red herrings, and has been criticised by some for relying too heavily on them, and that the final reveal felt overly contrived because there were so many red herrings that they felt like they were just there to pad out the runtime, rather than add to the story. You should also not use red herrings to manipulate your audience emotionally. Simply pretending that terrible things have happened, only to reveal that they didn't actually, is dishonest writing. Cake and eating, etc. As we have said, red herrings need to advance the plot, as with any literary device. They are there to enhance the story. You don't need to use them to have a twist or a surprise, so you don't need to use them for trivial emotional shocks either. The Sixth Sense and The Usual Suspects employ red herrings explicitly to serve their plot, with very little wastage and very little intention to manipulate their audience. This leads to their payoffs being satisfying and earned. So, how can we actually write red herrings into our story without them feeling forced? Well, many of the points that are important have already been mentioned. Make sure your misdirections are used strategically, integrated seamlessly within the story, rather than being tacked on haphazardly as a contrived subversion. Consider how the use of misdirection may complicate the story or challenge readers' assumptions. You'll need to be objective here, and not give your story more or less credit than it actually deserves. Consider whether it actually needs the twist, or you're just writing a boring story and trying to spice it up. That doesn't mean you can't use them to make a slower story more interesting. Of course you can. Just make sure that they are grounded in the logic and reality that you've established. Ensure that they make sense in the context that they're being used. I'll refer back to The Usual Suspects here again, where the red herrings of different suspects are exactly what we'd expect in the context of a police investigation, and are logically consistent throughout the story. As for writing these in practically, it's your responsibility to have the red herrings foreshadowed throughout the story, but not be too subtle or too obvious. Have the innocently arrested suspect plead their innocence in a way that makes the reader not believe them. They're being told the truth, and therefore the truth is being foreshadowed, but the other characters in the story may be influencing the reader's interpretation of that fact. Or perhaps the suspect confesses guilt as a twist, even if we aren't sure that they did it. Tyrion from A Song of Ice and Fire is a great example of these elements, with both a false imprisonment and a false confession that serve to move us further away from who actually killed the king.
I did not kill Joffrey, but I wish that I had.
Tyrion's alleged crime is foreshadowed throughout the series in the words that he says and the actions that he does, and this leads the reader to believe that he may have actually committed it.
I will hurt you for this. A day will come when you think you're safe and happy, and your joy will turn to ashes in your mouth.
The huge point here, though, is about establishing strong and fleshed out characters with distinct personalities and motivations that can provide fertile ground for red herrings. By creating a range of plausible suspects, you can keep your audience guessing and deepen their engagement. That's part of the secret of the longevity of classics from Sherlock Holmes and Poirot, as they have a whole host of characters in each story with compelling motivations to commit the murder. When you read them again, and you see the clues yourself, and therefore are able to dismiss the red herrings, this all leads to the final result and makes sense. So, before you set about misdirecting your audience, just keep these things in mind, and make sure that the red herrings are integrated into the narrative of your story with interesting characters, as well as resisting the urge to saturate your story with the stink of fish to hide the cake.